Our next presentation, just need my goggles here, is Albany 2026 Celebration or Pause for Reflection. And I'm very pleased to welcome Malcolm Traill of UWA, who will be presenting on this topic. Now, Malcolm is an Albany-based historian who is also a City of Albany councillor, and I know that the City of Albany has been incredibly active in preparing for next year. So he'll be right across it if you've got questions about that as well. I think, shouldn't dob you in, should I? Yes, he's very keen to promote Albany 2026 bicentenary events as a marker in history, but also as a key moment in Western Australia. So please make Malcolm welcome.
Kaya. Nalakin Karajin Noongar Budja. We're learning on Noongar land, and I acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging. It's really wonderful to be here, and thank you for the invitation to talk on this today. Let's get this going. There we go. Thank you, Graham, for the introduction. And Albany 2026 Celebration or Cause for Reflection, I can assure you that I'm in this presentation not going as far back as Peter did. We are going back in history, but only 200 and a few more years. So as we've heard quite a bit this morning and during the day about 2029, and of course that's the anniversary of Western Australia. And but Albany 2026 is coming up it's coming up next year. Our first event is actually this year, which is New Year's Eve, which is a very scary thought from our points of view. So what I want to cover today is a couple of things. The historic background to Albany, just to put you in the historic picture. The past commemorations and their focus, because we have had some examples in the past of commemorations and really what was done to commemorate particular anniversaries. What we're going to plan to do for 2026, and you've heard the one of the most exciting things, I think, is coming up on the menu. I don't think Albany will have ever seen anything like Newman, am I right? And an alternative approach, which we'll touch on as we go through, and then finish off is the big question. Will it work out? Well, time will tell, I guess. Just to start off with, well, disclosure time. Graham's already given away the game, literally, because, yes, I am a City of Albany councillor, and that's me looking very well dressed. It don't always turn out like that, but I'm also chair of the City of Albany 2026 reference group. And I guess, if truth be told, it was probably my motivation as a historian to actually stand for council, and for whatever reason, people voted for me, and here I am. And so the 2026 reference group, and Peter mentioned the fact that, is it a bicentenary? And we actually have officially dropped the word bicentenary, and I'll explain that as we go. It's actually Albany 2026 because we're not focusing on 200 years particularly, it's a marker in time. So, context. Where are we? And well, I think I'm probably assuming that most of you have been to Albany at some point in time, and if not, just a map of Albany and surrounds. Basically 3 harbours, Princess Royal Harbour, King George's Sound and Oyster Harbour, and surrounded by sea on the south coast of WA, about 35 degrees south of latitude south. But I think this is probably more indicative view. I love this picture of those harbours and the Southern Ocean, and we're surrounded by sea. And on this map, I love to put these names because these are key names, and as Peter mentioned, it's very much a commemoration and a celebration of Menang Noongar culture as much as 200 years of European settlement in this place. And so the names you see there, Albany has been known as Kinjarling for probably since dual naming became popular, probably 20 years ago, I suppose. But there is an alternative name. There's always alternative names in Indigenous culture, as you're probably aware. There's an alternative name of Kinsinup, probably the same origin, the kin, but Kinjarling, Kinsinup. And Menang First. Menang First is the waterway that surrounds Albany and probably the most significant part of Menang culture. Menang First translates as heart of the whale. Mamang is the whale, First, heart. It's the heart of the whale, and this is where whales would come, and so it's seen as the heart of the whale. And, so European presence, let's say presence, not occupation, not settlement, presence in Albany probably started back with the Dutch. Well, not so much presence, but sailing past in the 17th century. The Dutch did sail past. Of course, we're all aware in West Australian history of the Dutch presence on the west coast, especially those ships that forgot to turn left early enough and ended up on the cliffs of Kalbarri and such like. But there was a Dutch ship that sailed past in 1627, I think, the Gulden Zeppard, excuse my Dutch pronunciation, but never landed. They mapped the coastline, and the first European explorers did document. There's a succession of French and English explorers. This is a Menang group painted in 1826 by Louis de Sanson. It's the artist on the Dumont d'Urville expedition that came just before settlement by the British in 1826. Just the French almost got there first. But the English also documented what they found. It didn't have great interactions, but it did increase over time with the Menang people. The attraction of Albany to the settlement of Albany is pretty obvious from this graphic here, I suppose. It's the best harbour between, or anchorage between Cape Town and Port Phillip Bay. So you can see it's a logical stopping off point from ships from Europe going to the eastern colonies, to Sydney, Port Jackson, Van Diemen's Land, etc. The ships would, of course, come, often stop off at Rio, call in at Cape Town, and then their next port of call, via the Roaring Forties, 5 degrees south of Albany, would be Albany to refuel, and then go on to those eastern colonies and do the reverse. So it's a logical position, and from all those points of view, there's a lot been written on should Albany have been the capital of Western Australia, and we, for one, are probably very grateful for that, the fact that it's not. But it could easily have been, given its strategic position on the south coast, and it's, of course, a wonderful harbour. But the British decided to set up a settlement. It's not time for a history lesson necessarily here, but it's probably more to indicate what we are commemorating in next year, 2026. It's the first site of in Western Australia of permanent European settlement. I use the word settlement there. It could be presence, it could be occupation, depending on your perspective and your point of view. They landed on, they moored on Christmas Day, 1826. They didn't go on shore until the following day. I always say that's because the shops were all closed on Christmas Day, but they went on shore on Boxing Day. And this actually leads to another interesting point that I'll come to in a little while. This is a fairly stylised and old-fashioned picture painted probably back in the 1960s of the supposed landing on the ship, and the commandant of the expedition, the settlement, the garrison. It was a garrison, and it was the first introduction of convicts into Western Australia, so predated 1850 by 24 years. And Major Edmund Lockyer was in charge of the garrison, a major in the 39th Regiment. And he only stayed for about 100 days, before going back to Sydney. I think one of his claims to fame is he was married 3 times and had 15 children. And I did learn last week that between the birth of his first child and his last child, there was 54 years, which is not bad going, really. This is quite a well-known icon, and this actually also relates to a previous anniversary, the replica of the brig Amity, which he and the original settlers, the convicts and others who came with him, plus various animals and livestock, arrived on that Christmas Day in 1826. So who's celebrating in 1826? Well, good question. The soldiers who were there, probably not. They didn't really want to be there. Convicts certainly didn't want to be there. The Menang people, probably half-heartedly, perhaps not celebrating, but certainly interested and intrigued. And the other often forgotten group are the sealers, who were actually there, and very lawless bunch they were. And when the European settlers arrived, the sealers were actually cleared out pretty well from the area, because for many reasons, which we don't have time to go into today. So who was celebrating? Well, probably none of the above, basically, I'd imagine. But there's a really interesting connection, and Peter touched on the Menang side of the equation, because the chief intermediary, I suppose, from the Menang people was a young man named Makari, aged about in his 20s, had previously made contact with some of the visitors, the explorers, and he was a remarkable man, and we'll probably hear quite a lot about him next year in Albany. This is his statue in the gardens in the main street just near the town hall. I think many of you probably have seen it. Nice, taken actually from one of those pictures painted by Louis de Sanson. Here's the close-up of that. I think I've been told, and I've no reason not to believe it, that it's the only statue of an Indigenous person anywhere in a main street in Australia. So yet to be proved wrong. And I think that's quite significant from an Albany perspective. It's been there more than 20 years. And from the point of view of a recognition and acknowledgement and a presence of Menang society, I think it's quite powerful. So Makari is one of those symbols, I suppose, and of that. Albany was called the friendly frontier. It was friendly for a little while. Makari died only 5 years after the arrival of the first Europeans, so a lot of that friendliness evaporated. But Makari was a real symbol of that coexistence, I suppose, in those early years. So by 1890, there probably is something to celebrate in Albany. I've been looking for, as part of my my postgraduate research, I've actually been looking at trying to find out evidence of what happened in these anniversaries. And as far as the 50-year anniversary, 1876, I haven't found anything. I think people just didn't connect the fact that they'd been there 50 years. By 1890, I think Albany was thriving. Albany was a mail port. Fremantle Harbour had yet to be built, so all of the ships did arrive in Albany. It predated the gold rush, which was going to happen in the next few years and over the next decade. So arrivals for the gold rush brought in about 500 people a week through Albany port, many of whom stayed. So the economy of Albany was thriving, and so of course transport and communications were improved as well, with the telegraph and the railway line being built. So from all those points of view, by 1890, I think Albany realised actually it had a fairly significant place. And even then, there was a bit of sort of, maybe shall we say, tension between Albany and the capital. And that tension probably demonstrated itself a bit more by 1926, 27, which is the centenary, of course. And so that brings us to the question is, which is the right year? Is it 26 or 27? And look at this brochure that was produced in 1927. It says, pointedly, Centenary of Western Australia, Albany, 1827 to 1927. So is it 26 or 27? 26, Christmas Day, that's the landing. 27, well, if you can read that in the small print at the bottom, it does say to commemorate the first settlement of Western Australia by Major Lockyer, HM 57th Regiment, who hoisted the British flag at Albany on 21st January 1827. So the colonial presence dates from that 21st of January. The flag goes up. The British are here. The British are here to stay, unlike in the past where they'd come, they'd looked around, they'd left. So I guess from all those points of view, this is probably why we've leaned towards 2026, not 2027, to get away from that colonial tag, I suppose. And just some of the friction and tension that was between the Albany and the capital. No less an authority than Dr. Batty decreed that Western Australia centenary would be 1929. But discussions in Albany did take place in September 1925, because the government announced that it was going to celebrate the establishment of Perth as the centenary of the state. And the Premier, Philip Collier, actually didn't help with the tone of his press release. He wrote, "If, however, Albany desires to celebrate locally the settlement which took place in 1826, the government would not be averse to seeing such celebrations held. And it is felt that the government might give consideration to an application for some monetary grant if it is desired that this function should take place. Not really a ringing endorsement, was it? And the locals sort of bit back, and the editorial in the Albany Advertiser wrote, "Little surprise will be felt locally at the decision of the government to celebrate the centenary of the settlement on the Swan River in 1929 rather than the centenary of Western Australia in 1926. That Albany is anathema to Perth has ever been so apparent that any other decision would have caused amazement." But notwithstanding, we did apply to the government, and the government, we did produce this booklet and have some celebrations. I'll show you some pictures of parades. The government gave us £500 on a dollar-for-dollar basis, or pound-for-pound basis, to organise the celebrations, which didn't go that far. We got a parade, and didn't look like many people turned up here, but there weren't many pictures taken. Subsequent pictures actually show a few more people gathering. And another one of the parade, the grand parade, on the 21st of January, that day where the flag got raised. But this is a very telling picture because the parade was led by 3 Indigenous people, unnamed, and you can see that they're at the front of the parade as the parade is gathering on Stirling Terrace, the street down the bottom of the overlooking the harbour. 3 Indigenous people, 2 dressed up for the occasion and costumed, and one not, but noted in the press. So from that point of view, at least there's an acknowledgement, I guess, of Aboriginal people there. There was no such reenactments of the landing, but at least the Indigenous Menang people did lead that parade. By 1977, and I put 76 there, possibly deliberately, but most of the events were held in 1977. We learnt a new word then, the sesquicentenary. Anyone remember the sesquicentenary? Yes, and cheering crowd greeted the Queen. And so I think the main celebration was going back to the British connection, because the Queen came to Australia and came to Albany, and this was seen to be the highlight. And I haven't delved into too many other events, but certainly most things revolved around the Queen's visit, and you can see her. She actually launched, quote, the Amity, which doesn't float, but she cut the ribbon and was greeted royally. The slogan was "Take a trip back." So not sure how well that worked historically. It sounds like we were sort of stuck in time, but there was an awful lot of dressing up that year. As you can see, there was an awful lot of sewing went on, and not always entirely appropriate. So I think 77 probably marked as the year of the dress-up. Moving on to 2026, and this is possibly the most interesting part, I guess. As these things are planned, we certainly had strategic planning, and this was adopted in 2022. Because of the obviously financial and economic and other implications, we went through the business planning process, and it was decided back then that we would not focus on one particular day. It's a years-long events, basically, to commemorate this occasion. So the vision is to showcase Albany by reflecting honestly on our past, celebrating our community today and creating a future where anything is possible. So we've got past, present, future, 3 layers of that, and with equal weight. So from that point of view, that's our vision. And of course, if you've got a vision, you need a mission statement. And let's go to the next. Mission. Sorry, quite a few words. To advance Albany as a notionally significant regional cultural centre by showcasing and involving its diverse and unique people, Aboriginal culture, environment and produce, to recognise our shared past and look forward to our future, past and future. Events, programs and products will support tourism and social and economic development and benefits to the community, and most importantly, done through an Albany approach, Menang First, co-designed, co-decided within the Albany community. And to facilitate that, we actually have a subcommittee, a cultural advice subcommittee, which is part of Woggle Cope. Woggle Cope is the local regional branch, I suppose, of the Noongar native title settlement. And a special subcommittee has been set up to actually provide cultural guidance on incorporating authentic Menang Noongar cultural events in Albany, 2026 events, programs and initiatives, to ensure accurate representation and respectful portrayal of Menang Noongar history, heritage and contemporary culture, and to advise on cultural protocols and intellectual property. So this is in place. So every event has gone through this process to actually to get approval, if you like, from Menang to try and adhere to that mission, Menang First, Advance Albany. So this is really the mantra that's happened, and this is probably why we've gone for the 2026 year rather than 27. And as I said, it's not focusing on a particular day. If we're going to focus on any particular day, it's going to be Christmas Day. We'll all be so tired by then, we'll probably will have forgotten it anyway. So from that point of view, subsequently, or I guess a greater group, and this is the group that I chair, is to actually support the integrated delivery and to ensure appropriate community and stakeholder engagement on the development and delivery of 2026. And here's a photo of some fine-looking gentlemen and lady. You may recognise Lester Coyne, who spoke here 2 years ago with Bethany Finlay, and former local member of Parliament, plus Mayor and Council CEO. So that's receiving a big boost from Lottery West, who supported our Menang First vision to the tune of $5 million, for which we're very grateful. And so that's funding and bankrolling most of our events. But we've had setbacks. There's no denying that. One of which came in the about September, October 2023. This is Vanessa Gillies, who I think Peter mentioned earlier. If you remember, October 23 was just around the time of the Voice referendum, and that really divided the community, as you will recall, I'm sure. And so a lot of that goodwill about Menang First was threatened then with some actions, and another action, I suppose, that threatened us and hit page 3 of the Australian, which we didn't really need. Bad blood derailing bicentenary event, and O'Connor, our federal electorate, had the dubious distinction of being the highest no vote, I think, in Western Australia. 76% voted no in the Voice referendum. So a little wonder that there was that sort of, I suppose, antagonism, and we won't dwell on that. But and that followed up. That was on the 12th of March, 2024. Followed up with the following day. With a reference to First Peoples Slavery Sink State Bicentennial Celebration Book Project. So yeah, not a good time, and we worked our way around it. From that point of view, things are pretty well still on track. In the best traditions of government, we had an alternative plan B, and we've moved that into this place. So yeah, not without setbacks, but I think going on the right track. To conclude, I'll just show you a little snippet of video. And the website, which I'm sure you'll love to check when you leave here, albany2026.com.au, is forever changing as we're adding events. This is a little bit of a snapshot. So that's the place to be next year. As Graham says, book your accommodation. But there won't be just one event. There'll be a whole calendar throughout the year. So I think I suggest more than one visit to Albany next year for all of you. I think that's probably about me done. So thank you very much for coming and listening.
Thanks very much, Malcolm. That's a terrific presentation, and I'm sure it's going to be hard to get local bookings for transport and accommodation next year. There's just so much going on, but so everyone stay tuned. Really appreciate the presentation. Might just take a couple of questions. We've got a minute or two. I've got one here online. All right, here's a good one. What is the life of this work after 2026? So there's a lot of work going in. So what does it look like after 2026?
Yeah, very good question. Thank you for that. Mostly what I've been focusing on are events that are happening in 2026, but there's another strand, and these are legacy projects that, like the Amity in 1976-77, that's still here after 50 years, which is a wonderful reminder. So there are some big legacy projects which possibly won't be completed by next year, but will be in the planning. Botanic gardens, walkways, taking advantage of the environment with interpretation, collaboration with many of the folk at UWA in Albany. So that's probably the main one. There are other events that are happening in Albany, like an artificial surf reef, a motorsport park. I know possibly not for everybody, but it does appeal to lots of our community. So a lot of those legacy structures, they're big scale. They're tens of millions of dollars. So they're in the planning, and they're part of our continual planning. But they'll all be part of that commemoration for 2026.
Thanks, Malcolm. And we've got a few other good questions online, but we're short on time. But in the interest of equity, I might see if there's a question in the room. This one here.
Thank you, Malcolm. A great presentation. I was interested, it's the first time I've heard you saying that you're trying to get rid of a reference to the bicentenary, which is great, but today and all of my planning, everyone's still referring to it as the bicentenary. I just wondered if the City of Albany are doing a marketing campaign, or what the plan is to get rid of that bicentenary tag.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Yes, it has, that was the original title, I suppose. But I think and probably coming from advice from our subcommittee, our cultural subcommittee, especially after the issues with the voice, it just has that I guess tinge of colonialism, that this is 200 years. Menang society has been there for 40,000 years plus, yet to be sort of to get the final date. So we're gradually sort of trying to build that into the conversation. Hard to sort of move on from that. But look, a whole lot easier to say 2026 than bicentenary.
All right, thanks very much, Malcolm. I wonder if we can show our appreciation both for Malcolm and Peter at the back there for two great presentations.